have the corresponding one for the female part. That is, this from your mother, this from your father. Okay, so this is the mother's part. They are the same. But when they are functioning, one of them will be functioning, maybe the other one will be suppressed. That means will be deactivated, and then the other one will be working. So what I want you to understand is this is a chromosome. On it has genes. The genes are what we call the alleles. Okay, they are in pairs. Okay, they come in pairs. Now inside this small gene here, we have a lot of molecules coming together. And these molecules are what we call the DNA, or polynucleotides. Okay, let me make it polynucleotides. So the DOZ. Polynucleotides, okay? Or in simple terms, now at this point, let me just make a DNA for you too. DOZ, ribonucleic acid, okay? Alright, so these DNA, the DNA molecules that you have, they are coming together, okay, to form the genes, right? So you see that genes, if you talk about genes, the genes are made up of the polynucleotides coming together. First, we can have the nucleotides, a lot of them coming together becomes polynucleotides, okay? Then the whole entity in the cell becomes the nucleic acid, okay? So this is the DOZ, ribonucleic acid, this is the DNA. The DNA is a lot of them, DOZ, ribonucleic acid, a lot of them are coming in here to form the genes. So just note the levels, chromosome to genes, genes to DNA. At this point, let's take it this way, right? Now this DNA can also go down to become what? Nucleotides, okay? Then nucleotides will go down, okay, to become what we have about 4 groups. We have the adenine, and then we have the other component. I don't want to go into details now, we'll come there so that I don't make things complex. So just in simple terms, chromosome to the DNA, chromosome to genes, which are also called the alleles, then the alleles to what? The DNA. At this point, let's take it this way. When we get to the actual production for meiosis and then mitosis, then we'll bring in the other components, right? All right, so let's look at this one. Now, this is the life cycle of the fungi, a typical one. So here, let's see how the illustration will go. So you will see that here, if you look at this part of the life cycle, this is the sexual part, and this is the asexual part. Okay, so the sexual part, let's see how things go. Okay, so here we have here we have, let's see, the parent here, which has been formed, the organism that has been formed here. Okay, now we have N and N, let's say female and male sperm coming together. Not sperm in this case, let's say female and male gametes coming together. They come together and fuse, so they become 2N here. But here, that it's only the cytoplasm that fuse, so we say plasmogamy. So the cytoplasm, that's the space around the nucleus, fuse. Okay, so that is plasmogamy. Now it has to undergo another process we call chirogamy. Chirogamy, the nucleus must fuse. So that is chirogamy. At that point, it is now diploid state. Diploid state means now that one cell has two nuclear material or genes, part from the mother, part from the father. So that is 2. That's why we say diploid. Okay, if it's just from one parent, let's say father, mother, that is haploid. Okay, so that's 2. So it is 2 here. Now these 2 here, it's for it to undergo the sexual reproduction, it must produce what? The forms that are like the sex cells, okay? These sex cells are what you call here under fungi, we call them the spores, okay? So what it's going to do is it's going to form spores. That spores, so that's the parent. The parent itself is there. Then it's going to form spores. The spores will be N. That means although it is 2N, it will split the 2 into NN. One of each of these N will become spore. Will become the spore. Okay, so the N are just N. The spores are just N. Okay, then the spores will become, okay, they will go through the process. And they will grow to become what you call the mycelium. Okay, that's the body part. Okay, that mycelium is N. Okay, this N can divide to give you another N through a process called asexual. So this N can go through spore production. That's either by dividing itself or by producing spores, which will be 2N, which will be N. Okay, and then the spores will just spore producing. It will go into the spore producing product. Okay, now that will form spores because it is N. When it even forms spores, they are still N. You can't divide the N further, so it's still N. Then this spores will germinate to become the mycelium again, the vegetative part again. So this can go on for the asexual part. Then at the point, if it's going to undergo the sexual part, from the mycelium where it is N, we will have another N, which is also another mycelium. But remember the spores that we form first, some will be female, some will be male. So or some will be positive, some will be negative. Okay. So the female and male will fuse here. They will come together. When they come together, they will form the what you call the zygote. The two, but the zygote goes in two ways. First, the space around the two cells will fuse, which is the point that we call the plasmogamy. And then the next stage will be the nuclei will fuse. That's the cheiogamy, and then you have the diploid form. So what this is seeking to illustrate is we can have this picture, which is the sexual part, being for certain organisms. Then you can have this picture, which is the asexual part, being for certain organisms. But we have other organisms like the fungi, which will combine the two, or put the two together. And then we'll have the two generations like we talked about initially together. Right, so you see that it's important to take notice of the ends. That's where my focus is. Okay, once you get that, the meiosis and those things, we'll talk about them. If a cell is dividing to divide the genetic material into male and female, then that is meiosis. But if it's just dividing so that it will have the same father and mother genes in each of the cells, then that is mitosis. Okay, so mitosis just divides the cell into the same thing, but meiosis will divide them into half. Okay, at this point, let's get it as a picture, right? So this is a good picture for us. So for the asexual, is N, which is just sort of dividing to produce another N. Okay, without fusing. Okay, but to produce another N, it may use force. Some may also just use their body parts to divide. Okay, so that's the picture I want us to get. Either you use force or use your own body part to divide without fusing. That is asexual. But if two parents or two people, individuals, must come together, that is sexual. Right, that's the picture I want this to paint. Right, now let's look at another one for the protoctista. Okay, I talk about the 5 main living things that we have. We have the prokaryotes, we have the protoctista, we have the fungi, we have plants, and then animals. Okay, eukaryote is referring to the viruses. Eukaryote means without nucleus. So the viruses do not have nucleus, but they can have the nuclear material like what DNA or RNA. Okay, but they don't have the cell. They also don't have the nucleus. So they are just particles. The only way they can survive is you must have, if you want to survive and have the life processes that we talk about 7 of them, then you must have a cell. Which cell? You must have what? The cell membrane. You must have the cytoplasm, and then you must have the nucleus. Okay, but particles like viruses do not have the cytoplasm. They do not have the cell membrane. They do not have the nuclear membrane. Okay, all that they have is the genetic material. Okay, the genetic material of the DNA. Of course, it may be coated by some proteins or by some membranes. Okay, but those ones, the membranes that it will have and those coats are usually from the other cells. It is not of its own. It didn't produce that by its own, by itself. Okay, by itself. Sorry. So what happens is, for this particle to be able to undergo these life processes, it has to enter one of these living cells, okay, to be able to do that. So you see that viruses are particles in nature, they are not living, but they can reproduce when they get into a living cell or a living organism, right? That thing, you know, this is the production that they need in living organisms, okay? And also part of some of these life processes, they need the living organism, okay? Other than that, they are just a particle, okay? So when they are outside a living cell, they are particles. But when they get into a living cell, then they begin to behave like living things, okay? So that's the picture, right? So this has also illustrated the asexual, sexual, or what we call the other implant and other living organisms. And also in other living organisms, what we also look at as when they have both sexual and then sexual alternating. That's alternation of generation, right? Now let's look at another diagram. So this is same thing for prototexta and the prototexta, okay? So the prototexta, which is like protozoa, they are unicellular, they can sometimes multicellular. They may be mobile, but they are able to move, or they may not be able to move. Okay, so their picture is being shown here. Right, so here we have the sexual part happening here. So the spores here, they are N, okay? The spores here are N, okay? So in this case, we have, let's look at it from this point. We have meiosis. So the meiosis is forming the spores, okay? So, or the ova. There's something like similar to sperm and ova, okay? So the spores are formed here. The spores are in the sporangium. They are N, okay? Now when they come here, they can either go in the amoeboid, what you call the shape, or the flagellate shape. Amoeboid is like, they are looking like the amoeba, okay? So the amoeboid form or the flagellate shape. Flagellate usually refers to a tail kind of thing, like a tail or something like a rope kind of thing, okay? So that tail here enables them, usually the organisms, to move, okay? So that is it. Either it may go in this form or that form. Of course, because they are NN, they are going to undergo what? Sexual reproduction, so they will fuse. So this N is going to undergo sexual reproduction. Fuse, okay, but they are going through the spore form. They fuse to form the zygote, okay? Zygote will be, because they are fused, when they fuse, they become 2N, so the zygote is 2N. And this zygote will grow, when it grows, okay, it may produce the sperms again, or the gametes again. Then the gametes will come in the form of spore, okay? Then the spores will fuse, okay? But here, the spores do not sort of produce other spores without going through fusion. For us to say is a vegetative part of the process, okay? So this is another illustration you can look at. So here, it means for spores can act like can be deep N. In this case, they are usually N, but in some cases, some living things have evolved processes to involve what spores, which are 2N, right? Okay, so this is another illustration. You can look at this one to the same thing, but this is purely for sexual part. Okay, right? Let's look at another one. What I want you to understand is when it says spore, it means it is a kind of structure that is in small balls, okay, protected, having a protective coat around it, okay. So usually in harsh environment, or to sort of help with dispersal of the organisms, what do you call it, gametes, that is the sex forming, or the sperm or ova forming cells, okay. Then the one that can withstand this environment, like the spore, is formed. Other than that, then the gametes themselves should be formed to fuse to form the living organism. All right. So this spores usually occurs in the lower organisms, okay. Although as you go up, some multicellular organisms also have them, right? So this is also another one. Let's look at it. So this life cycle of the bryophytes, okay. So we are looking at the bryophytes. So here you see. Let's start with the gametophyte. Okay, so this gametophyte, from the name, gamete producing plant. Okay, So gamete is going to form, that means at this point, it's going to form what? The more or less the gamete or the sperm, or the ova kind of thing, the equivalent, okay? So that is the gametophyte. The gametophyte itself is a plant itself. It means it is capable of what? Producing gametes, okay? Now, here, the gametophyte is coming in. Now, it may duplicate or by growth or whatever. This mitosis that we put here is not it's not to form, what do you call it? It's not to form gametes, meiosis, okay? This one will be for growth. If you want to grow, but meiosis will be for forming the gametes, okay? Right, so it goes on. So now, using meiosis, it forms the gamete, okay? Now the gametes are what? NN, okay? And so they are coming in. They can go through these processes. So we have what we call the archegonia here. Then we have the antheridium here, okay? Now, when it forms the gametes, once it forms gametes, it is NN. So the N can be female, N can be male, okay? So when it forms the N, male will be in the antheridium. And anytime you hear the word the an, usually they are going for the male. Then G will be usually going for the female. So this archegonium, okay, and there's the antheridium, okay. So the two, it's like the sperm and then the egg, okay. They fuse, they come together. The coming together is what you call fertilization, and then form the zygote, okay. Then the zygote, once the zygote is formed, the zygote is 2N. The zygote to grow, not to produce another organism, to grow, it will use mitosis, okay. To grow. Now, if it wants to go through the process, as it's going, becoming mature, okay, it becomes what? Mature gametophyte, okay. So it goes into that. If you want to undergo another reproduction, then it has to produce spores, okay. The spores will be N, okay. Then the N will come. So the spores are here N. Then this N, because for them to come together and then form the gametophyte, to grow, the spores will then grow to become the gametophyte. Okay, then the gametophyte will have to divide to use some part of its body to form the gamete, which is the end part. So your gametophyte is what? The end that you are coming in here. Okay, it's coming in the form of a spore. Okay, that is it is end. Okay, it grows and then through another form it comes again and they have a. So let's look at this one. Right, so let me just recap again. So here, using for illustration. Now, if we start from here, the gametophyte, we have other cases. In the case of especially this one, the verified. The gametophyte, if it's N here, if it's just N, for it to produce gamete, then it will go through mitosis. If it is just N going to produce N, that's it. But if in other species or other, living things, if the organism that we have here is 2N, to produce gametes, if it has to pass it, then that will be meiosis, through meiosis. So let's note that point, okay? But in this case, it is the gametophyte. We have illustrated it as N here. So for it to form the same N, then that is by mitosis, because it's the same thing. Okay? If it has to have it, then it becomes meiosis. So just note that point. Right, so when you come down here, so depending on which one is going, so if this is biophyte, it's N coming to N again, but at this time, it's just differentiating to gametes and either male gamete or female gamete. That's the antheridium or the archegonium. These are free living, like it said, free living, okay? Or free swimming kind of things. So they swim and then come together to form a zygote. At this point, this zygote is 2N. That is for bryophyte. It's 2N here. And then it will also undergo mitosis to form because it's the same thing that is coming to 2N. 2N to 3N will be mitosis, so it forms a sporophyte. Okay. Now the sporophyte will also grow, and then it will form what the spores. The spores is sporophyte is spore forming plant, so it will form the spores. To form spores, usually the spores are for your they are more or less like your gametes or your sex cells. Okay, so it means they must be N half. This is 2N, so 2N to N must be meiosis. Okay, so at this point here it is meiosis. And meiosis is in real sense it's like two phases of mitosis will form meiosis. So after they have divided into the same kind, then they divide again to halving their number as n here, right? So note it well. Please note again, this diagram is actually specifically for bryophyte. The path chosen here is mitosis, because it's n to n is mitosis, okay? Now, if it were another organism, take note of that. If it were another organism, and here is 2n coming to gamete, then it will be meiosis, okay? So let's note this in the diagram, right? For the notice, okay, right? So that will go through, okay? So if you look at it, it's like here is the n phase, here is the 2n phase, okay, right? Because here we do not have the two separate ones will come together. The n will come together to fuse. So like the sexual part is occurring here, they fuse and then they come here as n. But the same sexual, it will come back to the same sexual. It is not undergoing the asexual process that we talk about. So the bryophytes are usually for sexual. Okay, that is why we have this picture here, right? So we are not showing anything asexual. Asexual will be that same part will give rise to another part of its own, another living organism like itself. That is it. But we don't have that here. But here it is fusion of what the two different cells they are fusing. So that is a sexual. This sexual reproductive life cycle of the bryophyte. Okay, the bryophytes, like we'll mention, we'll talk about later, are for sexual reproduction, right? So this is also another one that we are looking at. So this life cycle of what? The vascular plant. So vascular plant, okay, so this is the plant itself here. Plant itself, okay. That is is a plant itself, which is 2n, okay. Now it will start bearing what? Flowers. The flowers are the sex organs, okay, by the sex organs, okay. So these sex organs will contain the ova or the eggs, okay. But the eggs will be formed from cells. The cells will be split into two, so they will become two. They will become n. The eggs will become n, or the ova or the ovule in the what we specifically is called the ovule in the flower is n, okay. So when you have fertilization occurring, okay, so this plant with flowers, okay, plant with what? Fruit. The fruit has the seed. The seed is the fused gametes. The fused gametes came together to form the seeds, okay. So that's it. So you have the fruit in there, and the fruit with what? Seeds, okay. The fruit with the seeds is a zygote, which is 2n. Okay. Then this, of course, remember this can still be on the mother tree, okay. But we are now taking out the fruit. So the fruit, the seed is planted, or seeds being planted. Now the seeds will germinate. The seeds are 2n, germinate or sprout, and then seedlings will form the plant, which is still what? 2n. And the plant which is 2n want to undergo sexual reproduction, so it will form flowers. It will split its part of its cell, the gamete part, the germ one, the germ cells into the ovules, and then because it splits a normal cell into two, then they'll have n. There will be n. That means n means they have half of their parents' what? Chromosomes, or half of their parents' what? Genetic material, or half of their parents' what? Genes. Okay, then the process goes on. So there is a typical sexual cycle for the plant life. Okay, right. Okay. So alternation of generation, like we are looking at, maybe you are looking at the diploid sporophyte, the sporophyte, the one forming the sporophyte, alternating with haploid gametophyte. Okay, so the haploid gametophyte is there, and then we have the diploid sporophyte. So the sporophyte itself, the plant which produces the spore, is 2n. Then it will form the spores which are nn. And these spores will become what? Will grow to become what? The haploid what? Gametophyte. Okay, right. Now the typical life cycle of insects. Let's look at this. This is just an example. Okay, so it starts from what? Egg. The egg goes to the larva to pupa to adult. So we have a simple acronym here, ELPA. ELPA for you to remember. Okay, this is just a short notice. Okay, so you can look at this one too. So this is the classification. So this is a kingdom Prototista, okay? So kingdom Prototista, okay? So we have the Rhizopoda, Zoomastigena, Apicomplexa, Ciliophora, Euglenophyta, Omycota, Chlorophyta, Rhodophyta, Phio or Pheophyta, okay? Right, so these are the Prototista group, okay? So the main ones that we'll be looking at Omycota, Chlorophyta, Rhodophyta, and then so the other ones, just look at them. Examples are there. Okay, Rhizopoda is the amoeba. Zoomastigena is the trypanosome. Epicomplexa, Plasmodium, our own malaria agent. Ciliophora is the ciliate, the paramecium. Euglenophyta, example is Euglena. Omycota is a phytophthora. Okay, that's a bright disease of potato. It causes the disease of the potato. Yeah, it's potato as it's stated there. And then cocoa, yeah, cocoa is part of it, right? Then we have the chlorophyta. The chlorophyta is the green algae, or the spiral jar, okay? And the green algae or the spiral jar. Okay, then we have the rhodophyta as a red algae, as a plumaria, for example. Then we have the phyophyta as a brown algae, as a fucus, okay? This has stock called the holdfast, okay? So this just the diagram. You can look at the diagram, keep them all, okay? Special attention: Euglena, Paramecium, Plasmodium, okay, Phytophthora, because it's the blight disease of what? Potato, as is said here. Okay, you can look at it. So this is fungi, kingdom fungi, okay, or fungi, whatever way you pronounce it. Okay, so we have the phylum, Zygomycota, okay, Ascomycota, Basidiomycota. So you can look at the diagram, you can pause it, and then look at it well. Okay, so you must note where it's like so the Zygomycota rhizopods on bread, on the milk, okay, where it's like a sporangia, vegetative forming spots, okay, and then gammatangia, okay, that's the sexual part, okay. So sometimes the gamete, which is the end part, can live more or less on their own, okay, and so that becomes something that you should, so when you are looking at the lower class of organisms, okay, then Ascomycota, example, penicillium, on leather, okay, it grows on leather, okay, and then the bread, we have the blue, green mold, we have yeast, Ascomycota, like that, okay, where it's like ascus, so ascus is like a container, ascus spore, okay, a container that contains the spores, okay. Then we have Basidiomycota, we have the mushroom, we have the bracket fungi, we have the puff balls, okay, so you can look at that. Okay, so you can also look at this, that's a kingdom planting, okay. So the kingdom planting, we have divisions. You can turn, if you can pause it and turn it, see well, okay. So we have the bryophytes, their classes are there, okay. We have the Phoenicynophyta, which is also the ferns, okay. The bryophytes, we have the Hepatici, which is the mosses, okay. They lack what? True roots, true stem, and so on. Then you have the Phoenicynophyta, which is the ferns, they have roots and stem. They have the Lycopodophyta, which is a club mosses, okay. They have what? Roots and stem, okay. They are the club mosses, okay. Then Coniferophyta, the wood plants, okay. No flowers, wood plants, okay. No flowers or fruits, okay. Then we have the Cycadophyta, or the cicads, okay. Like what? They are dioecious, okay. That means separate male and female, okay, right? They lack flowers, okay. So that is that, okay. I mean, even if they will form seeds or whatever, if they will form their parts that will generate the other one, it's not true flowers. Then we have the flowering what plants as the angiosperms, okay, and a lot of them here. They are true flowers, ovules, seeds, and so on. And so you look at the picture and then study it. So this is another diagram for kingdom Animalia, okay. So we have the Nidaria, okay, Nidaria, that's a coelenterate, okay, coelenterate kind of things, okay. You have the Hydra as an example, okay, that's the sea animal Hydra, okay. So then we have the platyhelminth, that's the flatworms, we have the examples there, look at them. We have the nematodes, okay, the roundworms. We have the annelida and lida sedimented worms, okay. So under which we have so many of them, okay. And so look at the examples as polychaeta, a lot of working legs, let me put it that way. Oligochaeta, they are also there. Then we have the Hyoldenia, which are the leeches, which has one or two or more suckers to suck blood from the host, okay. Then we have the mollusk, okay, mollusca. So they are dorsal body, ventral, viscera, dorsal body with viscera within a mantle, okay. So we are looking at the shell kind of thing, the snail. Okay, so class we have the gastropoda, that's the snail, okay. And then we have the other examples, the pelicypoda, bivalve, okay, that's an example. And then we have the cephalopoda, okay, as example as the octopuses, okay. Then you come to the arthropoda. Arthropoda, we are looking at what the phylum, okay. So phylum arthropoda, okay, this animal, the phylum, the kingdom Animalia, the phylum arthropoda, okay. So we are looking at the various kinds, okay. We have the exoskeleton kind of thing. So we have the crustacea. So we have the chilopoda, okay. So these are the insects kind of things that we're looking at, okay. So you can look at the examples, just enlarge it and look at this word. Then we have the echinodermata, okay. So echinodermata, we have the stelloroids, okay. That's the starfish, the stelloroids, okay. Then we have the echinodia. Okay, echinodia, that's the sea urchins, okay. They are there, an example of echinodermata. Then we come to the chordata, okay. So chordata, they have the chordate, okay. So more or less you are looking at the vertebrate, the backbone, okay. So they also fall under this. We have what we call the first example as the cartilaginous fishes. Okay, so we have the next example as the amphibians, the reptiles, the apes, the birds, and so on. So just pause the video, enlarge it, and then look at the examples, right? So this is also the class Insecta, Odonata, okay, we have its examples given. Otoptera, okay, so referring towards the wing, okay, that's also given examples given as a grasshopper, okay. Odonata is the dragonfly, Otoptera is the grasshopper, the cricket. So when you have an example of the group, then you can use that one to get the characteristics. So the Diptera, we are looking at the house, the mosquito here, as you have seen, okay, as an example. Then we have the Coleoptera as an example, the beetle. We have the Lepidoptera as an example, the butterfly, okay, here. So just one example will be enough for you to start from, okay. These ones you have to keep on looking at them and then getting examples and then be able to find. So Hymenoptera, we are looking at what the wing joined by what hooks, okay, right. So two pairs of wings, okay, Hymenoptera, okay, right. So we have the four wing, okay, and then the hind one, okay, right. So you can look at the next one, which is the Hemiptera. Hemiptera, the Scottish stena as example. Okay, we have a piercing and sucking mouth parts, okay. Right, so that has been modified into what you call the rostrum or the beak. Then we have the Asexual, okay, which is membranous fore and hind wings. Termites as an example, and then the Chiroptera, okay, example is the cockroach, okay, right, so that is that. Now let's look at this one too. So this is the other mammalia, okay, so you must look at the examples under each. Okay, right, so there are the various examples. You can pause the video, look at the other, and then the examples, especially always learn from the example. When you get a main group, look at the example. So Actylodactyla, okay, so we are looking at the herbivore, the cow, okay, as an example, okay, and so on. So we have the Perissodactyla, Perissodactyla, okay, and we are looking at the example as for the herbivore, again, example zebra, okay, Proboscidea, okay, example as the elephant, proboscis, okay, so the proboscis, something like that. Here's your picture, something about nose, okay, that's the elephant. And then we have the rodentia, so the rodents, okay, example rat. We have the lagomorpha, okay, example as your rabbit. Okay, carnivora, yes, of course, the carnivores, the lions, so on, the cats, so so the leopards, they are all there, okay, the dogs. Then we have your Chiroptera, okay, so this is something to do with wings. Which mammal will have wings? That's the bat, okay, so that's Chiroptera, okay. Cetaceae, that's the streamlined body. Flippers, okay, so we are looking at the dolphin, the whale. So cetaceae is something to do with maybe sea kind of, not really as an example, but example, some those within the sea kind of mammals, okay. And then we have the primates like ourselves, human beings, okay. We have hands and feet to grasp, okay, nails on our fingernails and so on. Right, so this was another example. Then we come to almighty viruses, which are not part of living things, but I want to put this one here so that we can look at it. Okay, so when it comes to viruses, we can look at them in two things. We said viruses have the genetic material. They don't have the membrane for that genetic material. They have some modified structures that will cover them. So some may have coats, the protein coat. Some may have maybe a lipid layer like membrane around it, okay, but not the two kind of cell membrane, okay. So we have the DNA viruses, like I said, in 2, you can look at this, the DNA viruses and the RNA. Of course, DNA is usually bigger than the RNA, so it means these relatively base to base are going to more or less a little bigger than this. You can look at that picture, okay, right. Okay, so, and then under the DNA, we have the various, we have the adenoviridi, herpes viridi, pox viridi, parvoviridi, papovaviridi, hepantiviridi, okay. So the names will tell, okay, the names will give you an example. So adenovirus is adenoviridi, herpes under the HIV, herpes simplex 1 and 2, they are under herpes viridi. Okay, pox, these are the molluscum of, okay, they cause the smallpox, okay. Parvoviridi, they are the parvovirus, it's a very small kind of organism, a kind of virus, okay. Then you have the papoviridi, which is the HPV virus, okay. They cause rashes, or they cause infections in the genitalia, okay, right. Then you come to the RNA, so they are going to be small because it's just RNA, okay. Of course, when you are very large, the very large ones may have membrane, some may not be, some may be coated, some may not be coated, okay, so that picture can also come. Then we have the RNA viruses, we have the otoviridi, influenza, okay, paramesoviridi, that's the para-influenza, okay, coronavirus, okay, is here, coronaviridi, that's coronaviruses, okay, pico RNA viridi, okay, piconaviridi, okay, so we have the polio and so on coming. Okay, so RNA tells us RNA, okay, right. Then we have the real viridi, which is rotavirus, retrovirus, okay, retroviridi, which is looking at our HIV kind of viruses, okay. We have the Toga virus, which is the rubella. It's German measles, okay. The flaviviridi, which we are going to have our yellow fever, the dengue fever, hepatitis C, so on. Okay, then we have the encephalitis, okay. They affect the brain, Japanese encephalitis, okay. Then we have the Banya viridi, which is also the hantavirus, okay. Rift Valley fever and so on, they are caused by the hantavirus, which are under the Banya viridi, okay. Then we have the arena viridi, filoviridi. So the filoviridi example is the Ebola. I want us to get these ones because these diseases are coming up. So we have the last one is the what? The rabies kind of disease, the rabidoviridi. Okay, right. So the examples are very important. When you get one example, you can keep that one and then use that one as an example for that group. It can give you a picture of how the group will look like. Alright, so you can have this one, pause the video, let me fix it well, and then look at it. So let's look at the last picture. So this picture captures almost all the individual cell or kind of organisms or that you may be coming across, okay, and they are living. So this one, the first one, bacteria, how the bacteria looks like, okay. So this is the bacterial cell. It has this one has two cell membranes, okay, an outer one and an inner one. Between the inner one and the outer one, we have what's called the teichoic acid, okay. Teichoic acid stains a certain dye called the gram stain, okay, but it is very